So nearly 2 years ago, we conceived of a project that would help us bring to light hidden stories of places that we often see only as architectural or landscape elements as we go through our daily lives. And especially that's true at the Preservation Society. So we engage scholars and artists in a dialogue about site histories and more specifically, histories of people who lived, worshiped, learned, played, or somehow used those sites. Last fall, I was fortunate enough to find 3 amazing women to help me with this project as curators. Holly Ewald, Mary Beth Meehan, and Maureen Taylor became partners in this process, helping to shape it and helping to keep me sane throughout. So together we created a call for artists, and we put that out through a lot of channels, and we were thrilled to receive nearly 20 responses from amazing Rhode Island-based artists who proposed the most incredible projects to meet our very basic guidelines. So the 4 of us had 2 very animated meetings looking at all of these artists, all their proposals, the sites they were thinking about, and it was very difficult, but we eventually narrowed it down to 5 artists or artist teams to use 4 of the sites we had listed on our 2018 Endangered Properties list. And you'll learn more about those tonight. We were elated to find five different artists working with 5 different, or maybe more different types of media: comic art, screen printing, performance, documentary and conceptual video, and a muralist. And so last fall we started with a walking tour of each site with the artists and scholars that they had helped us put together with them, as well as members of the community. Many of you here were there. And from that point, the artists researched various elements of the site's history to explore in their creative work. So our hope from the beginning was that the new works would provoke conversations about the meaning of place, what happens when a site tells more than one story, and what kind of reparative work can ensue when a site erases some of its narratives in favor of others. And so tonight, for the first time, we will see the work of Megan and Murray McMillan, and we'll review the work of each of the other artists who have been presenting those works to the public over the last few weeks. So I'll introduce each of those as we go along. I want to thank our sponsors, including Rhode Island Council for the Humanities, the City of Providence, Department of Art, Culture, and Tourism, and the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts. So in your program, I hope you have one, there's an abbreviated biography of each artist, so I'm not going to repeat those. For the next 35 minutes or so, we'll hear from each artist. And then after, we'll have a discussion and Q&A with the artists. So that's why we have the chairs. So first tonight, we'll dim the lights, are Megan and Murray McMillan presenting a work I haven't even seen. They're multidisciplinary artists who blend sculpture, installation, video, performance, and photography. And so we'll cue that up and we'll watch about 5-minute video. And actually,
Hey, Chris. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so we can talk a little bit about the video that you just saw. I'm Megan McMillan, and this is Marie.
Hey.
And we were fortunate enough to work in the Paragon Mill.
Please speak up.
So I'll try my biggest teacher voice. So we were working in the Paragon Mill, which is, we were the second artist team to work in that building.
You're doing such a great job.
Okay, all right, I'll go right ahead. And we spent some time with this building, and what's really complicated about this space is it has an incredible history. So where it's located geographically is really important, and it's at this sort of beautiful curve of the river. And there's this incredible sort of backside that no one can see because the building itself is blocking the access to the river. And in the time in which the building has become sort of vacant and the use has been non-approved, and it's become this kind of place that's difficult to access but has this long history of what it was intentionally built to do, and the many, many years in which it did that thing, and then what happened afterwards, and this life that it had when it kind of outlived its purpose as a textile mill and became something else, and became a home for artists and a place where we talked to so many people who lived and worked and intersected with this space, and they said, oh, I had my 30th birthday party in this space, or there was like a band practice happened here, or all of these things happened throughout the course of this life that was sort of unauthorized life. And also we had this wonderful experience of seeing the site and having the caretaker of the site tell us that in the time in which it hasn't been, kind of continually occupied, it's been rewilding. And so the sort of nature has been coming back through the building and taking over the space, and the beavers are back. And there's all of these, the eels are back in the river because the river's getting cleaned up. And so there's this kind of reoccupation of the space as nature is coming back to reclaim this space. So we wanted to kind of think about this long history of the space, not just the building itself, but what was before, when it was just a piece, when it was not just, but when it was a piece of land that was also a home, and then became this kind of space with utility that was occupied for a long time and supported a huge industry and many people. And then it had this other afterlife too, and it's still there, and it's still this legacy that we're sort of left with. And so we wanted to think about the narrative of the building and how there's a responsibility that we have. I mean, this is where it gets into sort of some values around what does it mean to be accountable for the spaces that we create in this world, and what happens to those spaces after they are no longer serving their intended purpose. Who's responsible then, and who comes in to reoccupy or re-enliven or reinvigorate that space? And often it's the unexpected occupants, the mushrooms that are growing on the walls inside of the office spaces, and the beavers that are moving through the space, and the people that are coming in and having birthday parties. And so we wanted to kind of think about that multifaceted life. So we also had very limited access to the space, which was challenging for other reasons. So we worked with photographs of the space, and we refragmented them, and we built a model where we kind of stitched together in our way, thinking about this rebuilding or restructuring of the many lives of this space to make this model that stays present throughout the overall course of the video. And then we had someone come in who's very close to our family. And this is often how we work with performers, and she's someone who has a very, very intimate and strong relationship with our children, and particularly with our youngest child, who's baby. And she spent a lot of time walking him and carrying him and being with him, and she's a very important part of our lives as well. And so we wanted to kind of think about stewardship in this way that would have kind of a connection to what it means to care for things that you love. And how could we find love for a space like this? And so we had Christy come in and be this person that's carrying the building through the space, showing both the kind of destruction and decay and ruin and broken glass that's all around in this space, while at the same time setting the building free. So we wanted to send it out the window and back, integrating into this natural world where the sounds of nature then take over after the building itself has left our hands. So that was the kind of narrative of the of the video as we were seeing it. Our sons Arlo was telling me today that he wanted us to say that it's about our children. I said, okay. And but he said that they call it the video where Christy sings Hush Little Baby and steps on broken glass, which I think is a pretty accurate idea of what it is that we're, like, what does it mean to be carrying and stewarding something while at the same time walking across broken glass. So, anyway.
Well, thank you. We'll explore some more of that during the panel in just a few minutes. So I'd like to ask Walker Medley to come up. Walker is cartoonist, printmaker, and director of the Providence Comics Consortium, an experimental, education-based, intergenerational comics micro-publisher. And he's got some things on the piano, but if you could just talk a little bit about your work and process, and we'll get into more of it in the panel discussion.
Definitely, sounds good. And you can do the stand-up comedy thing of just flashing a flashlight at me when I've gone too long. I made a book from close to scratch. I made a hardcover screen-printed book about Knight Memorial Library over on Elmwood. And yeah. So just my process with that. So like Brent said, I do a comics project since 2010 called the Providence Comics Consortium. So I've been in Knight Memorial Library and all the other community libraries, teaching comics and with the idea of publishing, and those books being in the hands of the kids who made them and also check-outable at the libraries. Knight Memorial Library is such an awesome library, but I think when I was teaching there, it was like some of the architectural and historical grandeur embedded in it was just, I took it for granted. So I started this project. So I did a lot of research and I interviewed a bunch of people. Some of them are sitting in in a row together up here. But like physically being in the space, I started doing screen printing with kids in December after I found an old map of the neighborhood that had a large pond that is no longer there. And then kept talking to people, went down into the stacks and had a skateboarding videographer in town, Kenny Borge, go down there with me so that I had an extra set of eyes documenting the space, and used his photos and my photos as the raw material that I ended up making the book out of. And so this is like a kind of fancy-dancy screen-printed book that I'm going to give to Knight Memorial. I'm going to make an edition of 10 of these. I'm not done binding them yet. But the idea is that they'll get one of these, and then I'll make a proletariat version for everybody to take home and read in the bathroom and not worry about getting lasagna on or whatever. But and it'll be over here when we're goofing off. But that's kind of the fast-forward version.
Great, thanks. So now we're going to watch a film that some of you have seen if you were with us at Knight Memorial that David Wells created, but he's actually embellished it with some more archival photographs. So I think you'll be interested to see what else he found. And we'll dim the lights, and then after the film, David will come up and talk a little bit about it.
good. I'll speak as loud as I can using my projection voice. That's what I made, and my background is actually in magazine photojournalism. So this started with this lovely idea of going into that beautiful building and telling the story of the building. We never got in. I never got in. So then it became this long process of thinking about what could I do instead, and ended up doing this research. And the thank yous at the end, I know they went really fast, but it will be posted on the PPSRI site eventually, shared widely. And all of those people really do deserve thanks, because every single one of them was an opportunity where this could have gone downhill, down the toilet, turned out to be a failure, and so many people along the way helped me out and moved me to the next step. And I won't bore you with all of them, but I hope they're all there. One person I would like to give special credit to is Liz Fausick. Did Liz have to leave? No. Oh, there's Liz there. Liz, just raise her hand in the back. Liz created, yes please, the soundscape, which I think is 49%. I got to take 50% for obvious reasons. But the soundscape is so important, and given the opportunity as a photojournalist with a very old school approach to things, to try something completely new, to work with a very talented Rhode Island sound artist, and to create that for me was a really amazing opportunity through PBSRI. And thank you very much. Thank you, Brent.
So those of you who attended the event on May 4th at Paragon Mill know that it will be impossible to recreate that experience, but we do have some footage that Jed Hancock-Brainerd will. Do you want to introduce it first?
Yeah.
Okay. So Rebecca Noon, who can't be with us tonight, and Jed are generative performance artists whose theater company is Strange Attractor. They specialize in unexpected live performances, community-based events, and occurrences that happen inside and outside traditional theatrical spaces. And so that was certainly the case for this. So Jed?
Hello. I just want to start by saying that it is our collective loss that my main collaborative partner, Rebecca Noon, cannot be here tonight. She often refers to... That's okay. Rebecca Noon, my partner, often refers to us as a we, but unfortunately for you, she is the half of the we that is good at speaking in front of large groups of people. I will do my best. She Died for Our Convenience was a one-night-only choral haunting of story, song, and performance. The work was based on and dedicated to unsung female workers, mill workers, who worked from 1898 to 1960 in the textile mill at the Ernstiff Woolen Mill Paragon Worsted Company on Mint Ave in the Olneyville neighborhood in Providence, Rhode Island. One of our main goals with this project was to draw attention to and inspire curiosity around the labor that has been hidden or overlooked, both historically and contemporarily. In order to do this, we did research into the women who worked at the mill, but it was incredibly hard to find out who worked there, as there was no existing database which recorded this information. Often it came down to who listed the mill as their employer in an obituary in the projo, and then following that up with census and genealogical research. In an effort not to repeat this error with our own project, I will now read the names of all the core artistic collaborators on this project for posterity. There were about 50 of us who directly made this project possible, and many more outside supporters, including PPS, of course, RISCA, Rhode Island College, and Rich. If you are the kind of person who gets bored easily, I invite you to take this time to gently rest your eyes, or to allow them to wander around the room while I read the names aloud. After I finish reading, we'll play a little video clip from the beginning of the performance to give you a sense of what it was like that night outside of the mill. This is the part where you can close your eyes if you want to. Chrissy Wolpert, composer and choral director. Clara Vaishon, choral assistant and associate artist. Priscilla Carrion, textile and costume. Emily Shapiro, fabrication and space consultant. Emily is here tonight. And also Emily and Priscilla's work can be viewed there on the piano after. Andy Russ, sound and light consultant and lead documentarian. historian Evelyn Stern, prologue givers Tally Murphy, Tyra Wilson, Arnon Jordan, Ronald Kevin Lewis. And the chorus members, I apologize in advance if I mess up any of your names. Casey Seymour Kim, Lou Heinz, Sarah Reese, Tatiana Yanishevsky, Anna Wingfield, Kimmy Rich, Jenna Legault, Marissa Cambor, Colleen O'Donnell, Wanda Struckus, EDY, Susie Ryan, Martha Lavieri, Sarah Bernstein, Kate Shapira, Suzu Ledoux, Janine Bresner, Eli Nixon, Aria Boutte, Elizabeth Truskowski, Vicki Warner, Kristen Cowley, Johanna Walczek, Chris Brown, Laura Almeida, Jenny Young, Casey Theringer, Ellen Zonisser, Tristan Munkel, Janine Chartier, Emma Schlom, Emily Bryant, Lauren Watka, Jane Diener, Jamie Burke, Jen Long, Melanie Fuest, and Patricia McGee. Thanks to all who worked on this project.
Thank you for coming to guys for our meeting. A world tradition. Thank you for coming to She Died for Argentina, a world tradition by the Providence Preservation Society and created by Susan Sackler, the composer of Chrissy Goldberg. My name is Rod, and I'd like to share some information with you about this place and the people who spend time here.
Tonight, we will listen closely.
We will listen for voices we don't normally hear.
We will listen for the voices that spend time here.
We will listen very closely for the river.
Let's start listening now.
Deb Moorhead here yet? Oh, good. Hi, Deb. I got 2 clips from the program on the 11th. So Deborah Spears Moorhead is, among other things, an owner, teacher of Painted Arrow Studio and Talking Water Productions and a museum interpreter at the Meshentucket Pequot Tribal Nation. Also a co-founder of I'm not going to say it right, a Native American women's drum performance singing group. And I believe they were the performers on May 11th, correct? So I have 2 clips that we'll show quickly, and then I'd love for you to talk more about it. Okay? So, yeah. Sound? Well, maybe. Should be. Oh, I don't know.
You want me to say it?
Yeah, we just,
Okay, we're standing, doing song. Radio, hey, hey, radio, hey, yo, oh, oh, radio, oh, radio, hey, yo, hi, yo, ya, hey, yo, oh, radio, hey, hey, ya, hey, yo. That song is for when, the indigenous people from this area would travel the waterways. That's what we did for travel. It was the quickest way to get somewhere from one point to the other.
I'm not sure. There was sound when I tried it at the office, so I don't know what's happening. Well, Deb, I'm sorry the sound's not coming through. You want to come up and
Sure.
talk about what the murals didn't make it today. They're quite large, and but they'll be on display at City Hall from July to September, I believe.
Yes. July to September, and then I think in the Dirt Palace from then on. Okay. My name is Deborah Spears Whitehead. That's my English name. Waninukin, that means good evening. The Tusawees Katusipo, that means my name is Talking Water. I was born Babbling Brook in memory of where King Philip was killed in the 1670s. There's a nice little Babbling Brook there. And as I was older, my tribe named me Talking Water as a more dignified name for the Babbling Brook. Because, I mean, I didn't know that I was supposed to speak today, but with my name being Babbling Brook, you'll probably have to tell me, okay, that's enough. But I learned that from elders. I mean, I had a lot of elders, for example, like Tall Oak. And Tall Oak is really long-winded, and I always thought when I was younger, how does he have so much to talk about? I get it now. There's so much to say. So, let me explain a little bit about who I am and what I do. I'm a descendant of Massasoit, and I am very interested in the indigenous stories of this area. It took me years and years of research to find out my own story. Oh, do I need that? My own story of my history and my genealogy. So through all those years of doing history and genealogy, I found layers and layers of history. So what I normally do is have the indigenous people of this area come into my studio and they tell me their stories, the stories of resistance and how they survived through 400 years of genocide. So that's normally what I do, is paint portraits of Native Americans. And for us as indigenous people and indigenous people of the world, what we do is we're connected to the land, our homeland, because our elders for thousands of years have told the oral tradition of the land,
where our creation stories come from. So I know stories of the land where Moshe, who was from Martha's Vineyard, through Granny Squat across the river, and she's where Tiverton is, that's the land. And I know stories of Sky Woman coming from the sky. All these stories that are kind of like the resources that we have in our culture and what we know as what's comfortable and safe for us. Because culture comes from doing the same things over and over again so that you feel safe. And from doing these same things, ceremonies and things over and over again, you build traditions. So that's where our culture is still in our traditions, and that's where our connection is. And as Indigenous people, we lived in communal ways where the whole group would take care of each other, and that whole group would take care of the land. So the way that we look at it is, if we don't take care of Mother Earth, she may not be able to take care of us. And that's about where we're at right now in history. So,
That's great.
so the mural that I put together it started from the 1600s from European contact, and it talks about the layers of history of that Providence River, which is Parcel 1A. Parcel 1A is what I worked on. So I have a piano that's from 1600s, and so I called Brendan. I asked him, if he knew the name, the original native name for the river, and I just researched, and then I was texting him, I know the name. Nice, Kentucky. So the first one, piano was Nice, Kentucky. The second one is the 1700s, and it talks about what happened on the Providence River then the 1800s, and then 19, and then present day. So it shows what has affected the Providence River and how it affects us. And so that was what I did for my mural. And being an Indigenous person, our values are to take care of the land, so I felt like I was taking care of the land in this way through conceptual art, where my art tells an idea and helps to educate as many people as possible to learn about this idea. So the idea was to clean it up, clean up the river, and to reintroduce the indigenous squirrely things, fish and crabs and the four-leggeds and the winged ones, to reintroduce the land and the planting that will be able to make it come back and make it cleaner. So, and at the heart of that was years ago when my son was young. He was about 3 or 4. He's 25 now. We just gave me a granddaughter. But when he was about 4 or 5, we went to the Providence Mall, Place Mall, and we looked into the river, and it was so nasty looking. And I apologized to my son, and I said, I will work to keep this cleaner. I'm sorry that we let this go so long. So I feel good about doing these murals. And so what you're seeing on here is my daughters in the red top, my other daughter's in the traditional outfit next to her. My friend Pam, we started singing together. Netticush singers, it means sisters. We started singing together, and my cousin Pat on the other side of me, and a friend Ojetta, my cousin Doug Lincoln, on the far. Netticush started 20, 30 years ago. We wanted to bring back all the Eastern Woodland music of the women, because we were a matrilineal society, so we did make a lot of decisions and we did sing, but we had almost lost all the music. So now we teach as many Native women, and they teach us any music that we know from East New England. So anytime that we go somewhere, people usually ask us to perform. I just came back from Bar Harbor this weekend. I'm not over it yet. We performed it 2 or 3 times, and I sold out there, and I just got home, and I was like, oh gosh, I'm gonna come here. Surprised I'm not singing again tonight. So we sing, and we write songs about the stories and the history and the values of the Native American culture. So that's about all I have to say, but I do want to thank Brent for the support and Holly Ewald for the great support that I got while I was painting these murals, and Rhode Island State Council of the Arts and the Department of Rhode Island Humanities. So thank you.
Back. We're going to have a discussion that I'll moderate. In the meantime, would everyone please give a big hand to Anya, who's been running? It's not her day job. Well, I'll stand up. So it'll be easier to hand the microphone around. So, did anyone in the audience attend all of the performances? Well, I did. And Bishop, one of our board members, and Mary Beth. So, a few people. But if you attended even a fraction of them, like I did, you might feel that your brain's been a bit rewired. I feel like I've gotten a profound sense of storytelling through these various media. And so I just want to thank all the artists for demonstrating such professionalism, creativity, and incredible flexibility and adaptability to what were certainly difficult circumstances, much like we're experiencing tonight. The only difference is that we're inside the building. So I want to ask a few questions to kind of dive into some of the challenges, opportunities. So first, David. The Broad Street Synagogue, built in 1910-11, as you showed, had a couple of congregations there over the time, but closed in 2006, was then vandalized, and then Hurricane Sandy damaged it some more. There was work done, which the photographs were done, taken before the work was done. It actually looks better than that now, but the problem being that a permanent roof was not installed. And so, David, when you applied your statement of intent, you mentioned that you're Jewish, I believe, so your Jewish heritage. And I just wondered, to what extent did your relationship to the site or the history or Judaism influence your work?
Thank you. This is actually the 3rd project I've done involving a building that was people aspired to turn it into something else. And those were all born out of being both Jewish, but also as being a photographer who spent a lot of times photographing sacred spaces. I mean, I'm in here and I'm looking around and enjoying this building as well. The library, another beautiful building, but not a sacred space, still an important space. So part of my interest is in space, part of my interest is in faith, and it's always in storytelling. And so when the call came out, I said, I wonder if I can do. And that's what I proposed. And not surprisingly, what I proposed versus what became, it sounds like it's true for almost everybody to varying degrees. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or if I'm dancing around it accidentally.
That was great. So I want to ask Walker, you mentioned that you had been working at Knight Memorial, so you had this affiliation already, and you discovered some things that you hadn't really noticed because of this project, specifically asking you to kind of think about those things. Being that you were teaching classes back as far as 2010, hosting interactive events in this community space, when you went into this, did you have an idea of what your final product would be? How did that change as you researched? And I just wonder also, how is your relationship to the site now? Has it changed?
Thank you. Well, I think I knew I was going to do
I think I knew I was going to do a screen printed book. I had done a previous screen printed book, so my brain kind of had a template. But I think a lot of this project was actually an improvisation. So I was kind of totally open to what I was going to find and run into. I definitely wanted to spend a lot of time in the stacks because they're wild and you know, it's a wild zone down there. And I may have lost some of the threads other than that, but yeah, no, I was.
How's your relationship changed?
Oh, so right when I started working on the project at the library, Gail Yallop is the new managing librarian over there, and I had known her from other libraries, and so I don't know. So she started basically the week I started working on this, and she was just like, "Oh yeah, come on in. We're yeah, like it was incredible access and yeah, I felt totally free to go nuts in there.
That's great. I'm going to try to just yell my questions so we don't have to keep going back and forth. So just thinking about relationships, again, Jen, I know that you and Rebecca mentioned for some time you have been thinking about exploring the ideas of the workers and the mills and really bringing those stories to life. But I don't think that you had any particular knowledge of this mill building, except perhaps that during the performance, as some of the initial conversation was happening, that you did perhaps have some experience with the artist who worked in or created in the mill building. So I just wonder if you could talk about, you know, working with Xander Morrow as one of the scholars, who's an artist in herself. And
I didn't actually work with Xander, but I love Xander.
You worked with Xander. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Well, I was just wondering, what new knowledge or did you gain from working with the scholars that helped kind of evolve your project from what you thought it would be going into it?
Yeah, I think you mentioned this part that we call the prologue, which we initially with this project had envisioned that it was going to be a little bit more like everything was going to be this theatrical performance. There were going to be these other actors who were maybe going to speak text in addition to the sung pieces, and then lack of access to the space when the fences went up changed everything. And so we thought, like, well, what do we need people to know so that they actually can encounter the music in the same way and the space in the same way that we've encountered it? So in a way, making a thing that we download all this information to the audience before the music begins. So that's where that prologue idea came from. And a lot of that research, we talked to folks who lived in Building 13. We talked to Tatiana and Joanna, and they kind of wrote down lists of their experiences. We watched little snippets of the video of the closing party ritual burning thing. Dan also talked to us a bit about it. And yeah, and Chrissy too. Yeah, Chrissy had a birthday, but you want to say anything about it? No? Okay, cool. Well, I mean, definitely our relationship to the space changed. Of course, anytime you go someplace and you learn more about a space, I feel like I'm someone who always sees spaces with lots of layers of history on them, and multiple events, but certainly engaging with the research changed my relationship to that. Yeah.
Maybe Megan Murray, you can speak to that as well, since I already sort of introduced your scholar at the same site and the same limitations of access.
Yeah, don't make me answer that.
Yeah, I think, the mill building that we were working with, it was also such an important part of, Providence, Rhode Island artist history, and we're not to Rhode Island, but we've been here 12 years, and we've certainly had intersections with that space that predated this project that were, along the lines of going to somebody's studio and, seeing them working in this space. And the kind of like life that this building had that was kind of this completely independent, agency-free, it was an organic assortment of individuals and, collectives and, intentions and uses, and I find that to be really interesting, and for us, the parallel was so much present in the space because we had such limited access to the space, and so there were, it was kind of reconstructing, the knowledge of the space from, archival information, from photographs from Google Earth, from satellite imagery, from conversations with people, from memory, there was just this, and then from the very small intersections that we had where we were actually able to get into the space. And the kind of life that was coming through, even in this kind of restricted era where there were fences put up and there was access that was really shut down to the space, there's still all this life there, that was really, really interesting. And that was for us, I think, a big parallel to how we were thinking about this space.
Great, thanks. I want to switch now to a couple of sites that were more accessible, but also just going back to the idea of relationship. And Deb, you already mentioned this connection to the water that I had forgotten about your son and looking down from the mall. But one thing that really stuck with me, because you originally proposed going to the State House lawn, which was another site, and we were looking at really what you were talking about, which was water. We thought parcel 1A would be a little more accessible for everything. And when Holly and I first visited the site, you told us that you had a dream about what the presentation would be. This was back in the late summer. And you mentioned just describing the timeless association of water, not only with your tribe, but your own name, which you told us, power of the river and its influence on activities such as fishing and singing, and how that would be out. You even talked about having men canoeing in the river, but all didn't come to fruition, but the singers did, coming up from the water, which was really powerful. Your scholars were Ned Connors, an expert on industrial history, and James Sawyers, a scientist at the Department of Environmental Management who tracks water quality, which was one of your chief concerns. And so I just wonder how your experience in engaging with those two scholars and community members during our walk influenced the development of your murals.
I think that when we partnership with scientists and environmental knowledge keepers, we are in a win-win situation. So because the indigenous people know the stories through oral tradition of what has happened to this land, they know how all the species and land, air, and water reacts to certain things. When you work with the scientists, it all comes together, and we all can make, we can come to new ideas and thoughts on how we can change and how we can fix. And it's all a win-win situation, and I thought they were excellent resources for me for research. They pretty much answered the questions that I needed to know about the river.
I'm going to pass it back to Jen and Chrissy, because you guys have been creating and rehearsing and planning for months, and then I think Rebecca moved in the process, but she reserved a month to come back and make sure that this happened and rehearse. And then the fences went up while she was back in town. So the Providence Redevelopment Agency, which is a city agency, owns the building, and they entered into a purchase contract with some people to redevelop it. So overnight, 2 layers of chain link went up, and access was not sure even a couple of weeks before. So what was going through your heads? Did you think about moving the performance, abandoning it? Just tell us about what happened.
Yeah, so we had a lot of headaches
and crazy meetings where we suggested all kinds of possibilities. I was like, should we, if we can't sing it there, like, should we go to Slater Mill or do something like that? And Chrissy was like, I made it for this mill. We're gonna sing it in the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot if we can't do it, or just hop the chain link fence. And so I'm really glad we didn't have to do that, because we couldn't have all made it over the fence probably. Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Yeah, because you got stalled in your process of thinking it, yeah.
I'm Emily. That's okay. Yeah, so I was brought on as a designer sort of space. I've done a couple projects with Jen and Rebecca, doing like art direction and environmental design. And so whatever, 9 months ago when we started working on this project, and the first time we went over there, my role was going to be to sort of enhance the space or build something, and we had all sorts of crazy ideas, and there was, talk about hanging things between the buildings and, banners and having people inside and, whatever. And it was really going to be this big theatrical sort of performance in a lot of ways. And so then I wasn't able to do any of that, which is actually great, because of the chain link fence and the sort of not knowing whether we would even be able to have a thing there. We were just kind of in a holding pattern for a long time. And I think that was the best thing that actually could happen to the project. Yeah. Because as we kept talking about it, we had a short window of time at the end when we realized we could use the space. And we were like, should we make something, what should we do? And we were all kind of like, there's nothing we could add to this space that would be, that would make it any better. It's so alive and it's so powerful just to be there. And we had been kind of adamant, I think, or I had, that we not add any more trash to the space or not create any more garbage. My role became, I ended up fabricating some pins, which you can see there over on the piano. But I didn't really fabricate anything beyond that, and I think, it's totally for the best, actually. So I think we were actually able to honor the space in a different way than we initially anticipated.
Yeah. So hang on to the mics. I'm going to do one more question for each of you. And this is really about the future. So in the prologue, there was a lot packed in there. Starting kind of going backwards with the female textile workers, the tannery, the Native American population, and then came all the way forward to artists. And there was definitely a point of view expressed about the likely future of Paragon becoming housing. That's what I took away from it. So I just wonder, are there any takeaways, that or others, about the future work of PPS, the city's policymakers, or other advocates that you guys want to make sure are understood from your perspective?
I mean, I'm not a developer, I'm an artist, so I don't really know, but I would say that certainly considering the actual needs of that specific community, in the process of figuring out how you can preserve buildings, but also preserve them in a way that allows for use of people who aren't just people who want to dump money into development or make investment property. I don't know enough about it, but certainly in that neighborhood, and that I think that opinion coming through was definitely there from the artists, if it just becomes high-end luxury condominiums, that totally changes that neighborhood in a way that probably won't be helpful for the people who are actually there currently. Probably, I don't know. I'm just
an artist.
Do you anything?
I don't think I have anything to add. I second that, yeah.
Okay. So David, you had some initial direction from your scholar, Richardson Ojudan, was here, who's a community leader in South Providence. But you really crafted the film by undertaking your own research. Even when you were in India, you were pretty active in trying to figure this out. So I wonder, this is a hard-to-use building, and I wonder what issues emerged in your mind as the biggest obstacles to finding a new use or user for the synagogue, and or did any obvious things emerge in your mind that should be the future of this building?
Well, active is a nice word for annoying, and you're welcome to say it. I do want to steal a line from you, which is it really is the best thing that ever happened was not getting into the building, because it would have been a very different project. I think it would have been lovely and I would have been very happy, but I have done projects where I did get into the building, and it forced me to look at the history of changing communities. And then, frankly, when I stumbled on the Hindu temple down in Warwick, I said, wow, that's really about the change that this country's undergoing. So that's what I'm happy about not getting in. In terms of the building, again, I'm not a developer. We know there's access issues. We can name drop about whose fault it is. We'll skip past that. Richardson's starting point, though, was that this is a potential space for the community that's there now, rather than the community that was. And it's, of course, a beautiful building, and everybody in the neighborhood knows it. And I still don't know anything about politics, economics, but it should be a community center. It's at the heart of that community. It's a community that people around it. When I was shooting, people, they know that space. They revere that space. I'm aware there's vandalism, but the average person I spoke to when I was out there said, oh, it's great, you're doing something about it, because most of the people in the area want something to happen to it other than what it is right now. What that is, again, I'm not a developer, I'm not a politician.
So Walker, you worked with Shanavi Chai, who is the executive director of the Center for Southeast Asians, and their offices are right across the street from the Knight Memorial Library. And she shared during our tour last year that when she moved here as a refugee in the 70s as a child, she learned English at the library and learned how to be an American, basically, by going to the library. So we often tell the story of the library as the people that created it, the Knight family who owned Fruit of the Loom and textile mills. But you worked with her and also the users of the library, and I wonder what those stories point to as the future of the library, and how can we incorporate stories like that into the popular narrative? If you have an idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the end part, maybe I guess I'm not sure what the popular narrative is exactly, but I think in responding to what you're saying about like the synagogue being a community center, like I think we can't have enough community centers, and the Knight Memorial Library is certainly that. Talking with Shanavi was totally awesome, and there's a long interview with her in the book about her experience. I think that is the purpose of like a library. I also was a person who went to libraries every day after school, and I think having a safe space for kids to show up, and just have the fact that she's right across the street, when it's too hot in the library and they have to close down, or it's too cold in the library and they have to close down, the programming can go over to the Center for Southeast Asians. And so, and then that's an issue of like community centers echoing each other and like supporting one another. We need money for that library so that it can get in its best shape to support that community, and hopefully the folks that are in that neighborhood now don't get displaced with more waves of gentrification.
Great, thanks. So Megan and Murray, do you have anything you want about the future of the mill that you observed?
I think Well, I think the thing that we were so struck by this time in our experience with it is just how much toxicity there is just in the materials themselves, and how even, you know, a few years ago when it was more actively occupied, there was a greater sense of collective care. And so the building itself is in better shape, even though not all the users were authorized users. And so that kind of sense of the community knowing what to do with a space without being told is a really important thing. And I think that somehow, like, activating collective responsibility for a place that has particularly some environmental issues that need to be addressed is somehow important, that we have to figure out what to do about it. And I don't know that shutting off access is always the right answer, because I don't know if that actually makes the building better cared for in many ways. But it does allow access for the natural world to come back in. So that was a very interesting tension that we noticed this time around. So in some ways, maybe we don't need to do anything except but see what happens.
Good idea.
Brent, can I go off script just a little bit? I'm really excited about the conversation and the risk that you're bringing into the room. We're having artists talk about things that, I don't know about you guys, but I have no experience, I have very little experience talking about these sorts of issues. And it's a really special thing that you and your organization have created to make a mixed space where you're mixing creative talents and historic preservation talents and all of these things. And kind of going off of a question that you gave Jed's team, the thing that you guys could do in the future is to keep risking. Because it's a really wonderfully fumbly thing when you don't really know what you're getting into, and you do a call for entries and you don't know what's going to come back, and then they don't even know what they're going to do really ultimately is like it's not position. It's just like, that's a really strong thing that you're bringing to this community, and so thank you, and I think to the society too. Like you guys keep risking. It's really important. And it's exciting to see what's going to happen in the future.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. It's completely my comfort zone too. Final question. Actually, the idea. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. The final question that I wanted to direct specifically to Deb. You feel free to go off script, whatever.
All right.
But Megan mentioned collective responsibility, which leads right into this idea of the riverfront. And the history, from my observation, being here just 5.5 years, the history of the Narragansett people, all the tribes, is completely obscured in the city of Providence due to very intense development and transformations of water and land features. And I just wonder, how important is it to you that your work, or our work, inspire a reframing of the history of the place? I'm thinking specifically of the river, of Parcel 1A. And as we don't own the land, the 195 Commission does, but we can influence their choices of what happens on that land. I would like to know how you want your work to inspire us to a better future, but feel free to say whatever you like.
First of all, I think that we don't own the land, we're just borrowing it from the ones that are coming in for the next 7 generations. So we may believe that we own it and we may do all this work and pay all this money, but we really don't own it. But history does happen, and it's an incredible history on the banks of that river. I mean, Roger Williams met Canonicus, and he was, Massasoit saved him in Seekonk and then sent him over, and then, Benedict Arnold lived there, Roger Williams lived there. I mean, this place could be, it's just so historical to the beginning of the making of this country, and people walk through there and drive through there, and they don't even realize, what part of history they're going through. And what I love about it is that now it is public access. So somebody can sit there and reflect on all the different things that have happened on that land. They were very significant. you know, they were significant to the Native Americans, they were significant to Europeans, they were significant to all of us that make this place America. And I don't think that we should just forget about it. And I think it puts a lot of integrity in the people to define what is important, what are our values, and are our values strong enough to fight for them. And I think Providence Preservation Society does that, and artists do that because we have something to say, and we say the same thing, but in all different mediums. So I really enjoyed this project.
Thank you very much. So we want to open it up. So we have about 15 minutes. Does anyone have a question for the artist?
I actually have a question for you, Brett. The Paragon Mills have been on the Most Endangered list for at least once in the past. And I'm curious as to who owns it, what percentage is occupied, is the part that we saw in the videos, is that in any way accessible? And what do you think the future is? A lot of questions.
Well, Paragon Mill is owned by the city. It was owned by Unveiled Housing, which is one neighborhood builders now. But it's owned by the city. Again, it's completely vacant unless someone's squatting there. The last person who was living there is now in a care facility. He actually needed some care. The future, if they do have a potential buyer to redevelop it as housing. So it would probably be similar to Rising Sun or the other ones along Valley Street, I would imagine. I don't actually know, but that's what I would think. Any other questions?
This is for Jen and Emily. There were a lot of people that came to your event. 350 members.
415.
450. Did that have any impact on the way that the performance played out? I mean, did you expect that many people? And what did you do about it?
Yeah, so I think we were expecting like tops, like what, 150, 200 maybe?
The city said we could have 200, so that was our cap.
Yeah, we made 200 buttons. There was a moment where we're like, should we make more? Yeah. And they're like, no, it'll be fine. And how it changed it. I mean, I am someone who gets very particular about sightlines. Like even right now, this kind of environment drives me crazy. Like I want to just stand up so that everyone can see me, you know, but we're like in these chairs. It's just like a funny thing. So for me, the 400, the 415 people there, I had a mini panic attack. Like, how are we going to accommodate all these people? How is safety going to be accounted for? Like, a lot of people brought chairs, so that was the thing on the flyer, like, we can't have chairs in that center area, because people will, like, if there's a problem, people won't get their chairs fast enough, and, I don't know, people get trampled. Like, I was, like, terrified. Walker, when he came in, I was like, it's really turning into a Woodstock, and Walker was like, I think you mean Fire Festival. And I was like, oh, no, Fire Festival. So yeah, it was terrifying. And I think that we did okay, but personally, I would have liked everyone to be able to see unimpeded. That's like my jam.
The only thing that I think changed because of the number of people, we had a system for like giving out the pins and being like, you know, you are circle group, go with your circle leader, they're over there. And for the people that arrived after the pins were already gone, it was kind of like every man for himself. And we were like, okay, you go to that group and you go to that group. And the woman who was with me, directing people, was kind of like, go wherever your heart takes you. And so then, which was beautiful, but then, you know, people were milling around in a way that became a little difficult to control. So I was a little nervous that people wouldn't hear the prologue, and I think some probably did miss it.
Yeah.
But I think it's fine.
Since you did such a good job.
So I think my question is more to you actually, which is 4 out of the 5 projects are in communities where now it's more of a minority population. So what does it say about the city that is not supporting the preservation of these buildings?
Well, I think it's a good question. A lot of things come down to, well, that's a good question. I think part of the reason we chose these sites is that they're not thought of as much, not in the sort of the community psyche. Paragon Mill, you really don't see unless you're in Orneville all the time. Broad Street Synagogue, just because it's been closed for so many years, unless you're in South Providence, you're not seeing it.
So are we talking about the east side not seeing it, or?
A lot of, power resides in certain communities more than others, I think, although, interestingly, our city council is predominantly not east side, the people that are in power, so perhaps there can be a shift, but I don't know what that is. We're trying to bring these ideas to light and encourage more thoughtful discussion. I think these ideas of community-driven uses is really important, and that we can promote that more. But I don't really know the answer. You had a question?
I wanted to ask Emily if you would talk about the process of the costumes, because the aesthetic that you came up with, because it was so moving.
It was not me.
But you worked on it, right? You were part of that.
That was Priscilla Carrion. I cannot take credit for the costumes.
Well, any of the aesthetic that you worked on, because
Yeah.
it was so.
Well, I can talk about what she did with these aprons. I don't know if I need the microphone. Okay, sure. So we visited the mill, I don't know, September or something like that. And the design on the aprons is coming from the floorboards. When you walk through, if you have been inside, or you probably won't get the chance to go inside now, sadly, but they're incredible. We probably have some photos. They're all bowed and kind of sticking up and at odd angles. And we were really struck, and Priscilla specifically was really struck by that. We talked about it a lot. And so that kind of made its way into this design that she
designed the
fabric? Yes. She designed and then screen printed on the fabric, yeah. And then the head thing, what's it called? Kerchief? Scarf? Yeah. Handkerchief. This is...
On your head, Red.
On your head,
I don't know how.
They're asking you to put it on. It's a little bit difficult to see in the light because the design that you see, that's sort of that rust color, continues all the way around in a sort of a gold on the other corner. But this was inspired by like blood vessels, right?
Blood vessels, and then also the way that rivers look, the arterial nature of rivers. So it's kind of the idea of like the internal, like the lungs. We talked a lot about like respiratory issues with working in mills. So it's the kind of the lungs and blood vessels being woven into the fabric.
And then the color palette we wanted to keep pretty muted. So we went with sort of gray and brown, kind of an ode to this space itself and the kind of oppression of the space, I think.
Yeah, there was, to talk about process, there was a moment where it was like we were doing it late at night, and we were in lights and stuff, and so it was like glow in the dark for a little bit, and then Priscilla was like, why am I making like disco wear? And there were all these like dangly, like reflective ball things. I mean, they were pretty cool, but then when it wasn't happening at night, we didn't do that.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Providence Preservation Society for helping us to bring Endangered Properties and help us to see into the different neighborhoods that these exist in Providence. So one of the things that, this is terrific, thank you. One of the voices that is missing for me is the voice of the curators. And I wonder if there are curators here, is Holly here, is Megan here, is
They're all here.
Is Maureen, sorry, Mary? Oh, yeah. I wonder if they would be willing to say a few words about their part in this process, because it hasn't been spoken to yet.
What a great idea. Who wants to go first? Do you want to wear an apron?
I want a kerchief. I'll wear a kerchief. Well, thank you for that question. Nice to see all of you. I don't know if you'll remember that. I'm Mary Beth. This is Holly.
You guys come up here.
We're all abandoning it.
Well, briefly, so do you remember when Providence Preservation did the photo exhibits of the endangered properties? Do you remember that? You had so Brent, well, maybe you should go first because it came to you first.
No, you're already going.
Brent and I got to know each other in 2015 and started talking about properties and different ways to bring visibility to them. And then he contacted me about doing photography, a call to photography. I'm a photographer, so a call to photographers to interpret a selection of these sites. And I have been friends with Holly for 20 years and was thinking about her work with the layers of history in various sites in Rhode Island. And so I suggested to Brent that instead of just photography, we opened it up to multiple disciplines, any disciplines at all. And Maureen was already on board, who's a photo history expert, and really knows what the archive of historic photos in Rhode Island contains. But I'm so proud that I said to Brent, but I think we should have Holly too. So we looked at the sites and thought about which ones were, Superman Building was on the table for a while, and we went back and forth and thought, but everybody already knows about Superman Building. What about these places that people don't know much about? And all three of us, in our own different ways, are interested in untold stories and questions of visibility and whose story is the main one and who's missing from that. So we got really excited about crafting this call that was very much about what's missing from the surface. I think we all kind of work with that question in different ways.
And then we invited the artists, and we had I wouldn't call it a brainstorming session, but the artists all came and presented their ideas, and the three of us were like, whoa. We're unbelievable. I mean, we had this idea with Brent, and then it became something else.
We sent out a thing,
better.
and then everything came in.
And everything came in, and we once we expanded it from just visual art to all types of art, I think it really gives the community a better way of understanding the history of Providence and the importance of these buildings.
And I just remember back on the kind of looking at all the proposals, and there was, I think, about 18 proposals or something, and it was like, oh my God, people are really excited about this. It's fantastic. And we really kind of went back and forth. It was a very hard decision about which projects to select, but we were kind of thinking about different audiences that would be attracted by the different projects, and we wanted to have a variety of trying to reach as many different folks as we could, and that was part of the selection process. I remember really personally fighting for a Knight Memorial because I knew that that was a really important building for that community. And then when we got the proposals by the artists, Knight was one of the places that had a number of proposals, as did the Paragon Mills. So that was kind of interesting to sort of see how many proposals we had for the different sites. And then we ended up having 4 sites because we had so much interest in Paragon Mills. And it was kind of really kind of throwing something out there and seeing what the response would be, and then kind of taking the response and working with that response. So in terms of, some of you talked about risk, you talked about risk. I mean, I think it was all kind of, I kept telling Brent, it's just the pilot, don't worry, it's going to be okay. Because he was kind of freaked out, because, I mean, Brent was really fabulous in terms of maintaining his cool with all the ups and downs. This was a real stretch for him, and he was really great. So, and we're trying to make sure that he does it again.
One quick thing, I loved what Maury said about risk, and because it was to put historians and preservationists and artists all in a bag and shake it up and think that we're going to end up here tonight with an outcome was risky. But you know, those of you in the audience who are artists know. I mean, if I apply for a grant to do a project and I get it, I'm completely ignorant of how crazy the people are who gave me the grant. It doesn't matter at all. I'm going to work my tail off. And, you know, David Wells works his tail off. And we knew that all of these artists, Deb comes in with all of her ancestry as part of that project. She doesn't care that we're sweating and crazy. She's going to do her very best thing. And so we knew that artists were going to bring that. And it's just so clear that that's what happened. I mean, all of you, Walker, everybody, my God, you know, Strange Attractor, all of it, so.
Yeah, I guess I'm a historian, not an artist, but I'm an art appreciator, and I love all of these projects, and I love what you've all brought to the table, and I really thank Brent and PPS and all the funding sources for letting us explore the boundaries of what's possible.
Thanks. Well, and as Holly said, we've now considered this a pilot. So we're going to figure out how to find real money so we can actually pay the artists for the work they do, because they had very small budgets and they did a lot with those, and we can't thank them enough. So I want to thank you guys, my curators, and all of you who participated in the walking tours, the presentations, the performances, and tonight. And so we're going to close it up. We're going to go over to the Wedding Cake House and celebrate. That's another former Most Endangered site that's been brought back to life by who else? Artists. So thanks for coming tonight.